Private Jack Macy crouches in the mud near the Rhine River, inflating what looks like a 40-ton Sherman tank. Except this tank weighs 90 pounds. It is made of rubber. And if a German patrol stumbles into this forest clearing in the next 20 minutes, Macy will not be treated as a prisoner of war. He will be shot as a spy. March 1945. 1,200 American soldiers are attempting the most insane mission of World War II. They are going to convince Hitler's best intelligence officers that 30,000 men are preparing to cross the Rhine at this exact location. They will do this with inflatable props, speakers playing sound effects, and fake radio chatter. If it works, the real American assault will hit 15 miles away, against almost no resistance. If it fails, thousands of real soldiers will die walking into a German ambush. And right now, in the darkness, Macy hears voices. German voices. Close. He freezes. His hand is still on the air compressor. The half-inflated tank looks ridiculous, like a collapsed circus tent. If enemy scouts see this, the entire operation implodes. 2 actual American divisions crossing the Rhine tomorrow morning will face the full force of German armor because an art student from New York could not inflate a rubber tank fast enough. The voices fade. Macy exhales. He keeps pumping air. This is the 23rd Headquarters Special Troops, the Ghost Army. And every single man here understands the math. They are pretending to be 30,000 soldiers, but they number only 1,100. If German intelligence realizes the deception, the enemy will know that the real attack must be happening somewhere else. Wehrmacht panzer divisions will reposition. American boys will die by the hundreds before they even reach the riverbank. 3 men from the Ghost Army have already been killed in previous operations. Dozens more wounded, because this is not some safe job behind the lines. These soldiers work within rifle range of the enemy, often closer. During one mission, a German patrol passed within 100 yards of their inflatable headquarters. The Ghost Army soldiers held their breath and prayed the enemy would not investigate the canvas command post that would collapse if you leaned against it. But let us go back, because the story of how artists and sound engineers ended up on the front lines impersonating armored divisions is almost harder to believe than the missions themselves. January 1944. The Pentagon has a problem. Allied intelligence knows the German army is skilled at repositioning forces rapidly. Wehrmacht commanders read the battlefield, identify threats, and respond within hours. Every Allied offensive costs thousands of lives because the Germans always seem to have reserves in the right place at the right time. 2 officers propose a radical solution. Lieutenant Colonel Clifford Simonson and Colonel Harry Reeder pitch an idea so strange that most generals dismiss it immediately. Create a traveling deception unit. Artists who can build fake equipment. Audio engineers who can simulate battle sounds. Radio operators who can impersonate entire divisions. Make the Germans see threats that do not exist. Force them to waste men and ammunition defending against phantoms. The proposal almost dies in committee. Then someone points out the British used similar tactics in North Africa. Operation Bertram fooled Rommel before El Alamein. Fake tanks drew German forces away from the real attack. It worked once. Maybe it can work again. The Pentagon approves the 23rd Headquarters Special Troops. Now they need to find soldiers capable of pulling off this insanity. The recruitment is bizarre. The Army does not want infantry veterans. It wants creative people, artists, designers, men who understand illusion. The unit roster eventually includes Bill Blass, who will become one of the most famous fashion designers in America. Ellsworth Kelly, whose paintings will hang in major museums. Art Kane, future legendary photographer. These men did not enlist to shoot Germans. They enlisted because they could draw. They arrive at training camp and receive the strangest briefing in military history. You will impersonate entire divisions. You will make the enemy believe thousands of soldiers are in one location while the real units attack elsewhere. You will use inflatable equipment, recorded sounds, and fake radio transmissions. If you are captured, you will likely be executed. The Geneva Convention does not protect soldiers engaged in tactical deception. The equipment arrives. Inflatable Sherman tanks that 2 men can carry, dummy artillery made from rubber tubes and canvas, fake supply dumps assembled from painted wood. From 500 feet in the air, German reconnaissance planes cannot tell the difference. From 50 feet, it looks like a high school theater prop. The sonic deception team receives gear that seems impossible. Enormous speakers mounted on armored vehicles, recordings of actual tank battalions moving into position. Engineers spent weeks capturing authentic sounds, tank engines idling, treads clanking over bridges, artillery being loaded, radio chatter between crews. When played at high volume in the darkness, it creates the acoustic signature of an armored division preparing for battle. Then there are the radio operators, the most critical element. German signals intelligence does not just intercept messages. They analyze everything: transmission frequencies, encryption patterns. Individual operators have unique styles of keying Morse code. The Germans catalog this information. They know which radio operator belongs to which unit. If the 23rd sends fake transmissions, those transmissions must be perfect. One mistake and German intelligence will know something is wrong. The Ghost Army studies real division radio networks for months. They memorize call signs, practice encryption procedures, learn to key Morse code exactly like specific operators in real units. They create entire fictional conversations between fictional officers about fictional troop movements, all following authentic military protocols. February 1945. The first major test. Operation Bougainville. The Ghost Army impersonates elements of the 90th Infantry Division near the German border. They set up inflatable tanks, broadcast sound effects, send fake radio traffic. Then they wait to see if the Germans take the bait. German artillery opens fire on their position. Shells explode among the rubber tanks. The deception worked. The enemy believes a real armored unit is here. But success carries a terrible price. Through a miscommunication, a real American tank company attacks from near the Ghost Army position. German guns, already aimed at the fake division, immediately destroy 5 real tanks. The crews never had a chance. They were decimated before reaching the line of departure. The Ghost Army soldiers watch men die because their deception worked too well. This is not a game. This is not theater. Real blood spills because of their rubber props and sound effects. Now it is March. The Rhine River, the final barrier protecting Germany itself. Allied command is planning the largest river crossing since D-Day. Casualties could be catastrophic unless the Germans make one critical mistake, unless they position their reserves in the wrong place. That is where the Ghost Army comes in. Operation Viersen, the biggest deception they have ever attempted. For 3 days, they must convince Wehrmacht intelligence that 2 full divisions are massing at one crossing point. Meanwhile, the real 9th Army will cross 15 miles north. Jack Macy finishes inflating his tank. It looks perfect in the darkness. He stakes it down so wind will not tip it over. In a few hours, German reconnaissance planes will fly overhead. They will photograph what appears to be an entire armored division. But Macy knows the truth. He is staking down a balloon. And if the Germans figure that out, men he will never meet are going to die tomorrow. The sonic trucks move into position. Radio operators begin transmitting. The greatest magic show of World War II has begun. And the audience has no idea they are watching a performance that will change history. The man who will save thousands of lives is holding a paintbrush. His name is Arthur Shilstone. Before the war, he painted magazine covers in Manhattan. Now he is crouched beside an inflatable tank in a French forest, adding mud streaks to the rubber treads. Not random streaks. Specific patterns that match how real tank treads collect dirt after traveling 50 miles on European roads. Because German photo analysts study these details. They measure shadows. Compare weathering patterns. Look for inconsistencies that reveal deception. One wrong brushstroke could unravel everything. Shilstone learned this the hard way. During an early operation, his team set up dummy tanks too perfectly. Every vehicle facing the exact same direction. Treads too clean. No variation in camouflage netting. A German reconnaissance pilot photographed the position and command immediately identified it as fake. Real tank crews are sloppy. They park at odd angles, leave equipment scattered, create mess. The Ghost Army analyst who spotted the error probably saved lives that day. Now Shilstone knows better. He paints oil stains under engine blocks, scatters empty fuel cans, even tears small holes in camouflage nets to simulate wear. Perfection is suspicious. Chaos looks real. But visual deception is only one layer of an incredibly complex illusion. And it is not even the most important layer. 50 yards away, Lieutenant Dick Syracuse stands inside what looks like an ordinary Army half-track. Except this vehicle carries no weapons, no ammunition, just a stack of enormous speakers and playback equipment that weighs over 500 pounds. Syracuse checks his watch. In exactly 12 minutes, he will broadcast the sound of an entire tank battalion moving into position. If he plays the recording too early or too late, the timing will not match the fake radio traffic. German intelligence will notice the inconsistency. The sonic deception unit is perhaps the strangest invention of the entire war. Engineers spent months recording actual military operations. They captured tank engines at different speeds, treads moving over various terrain, artillery being fired and reloaded, trucks shifting gears, soldiers shouting commands, engineers hammering bridge supports. Every sound a real division makes during deployment. Then they mixed these recordings like a composer arranging a symphony. The playback must tell a story. First, distant engine noise suggesting vehicles approaching. Then closer sounds of tanks parking, crews dismounting. Radio chatter increases. Supply trucks arrive. The audio creates a timeline that matches what German observers expect to hear when a division sets up camp. But here is the terrifying part. The speakers are so loud they can be heard for 15 miles, which means they can definitely be heard by German positions less than a mile away. If enemy troops decide to investigate the noise, they will find exactly 12 Americans operating sound equipment instead of the hundreds of soldiers the audio suggests. During one operation, a German patrol did exactly that. They heard tank sounds and came looking. The sonic unit had maybe 90 seconds warning. They killed the speakers, abandoned the half-track, and disappeared into the woods. The German patrol found the vehicle, examined the equipment, and apparently decided it was some kind of broken radio truck. They moved on. The Americans waited 2 hours, snuck back, and restarted the playback. No one slept that night. Syracuse signals his operator. The recording begins. Through the massive speakers, the forest fills with the unmistakable sound of Sherman tanks. Engines rumbling, metal clanking, officers yelling coordinates. It is so realistic that Syracuse, who knows it is fake, still feels his pulse quicken. 300 yards away, in a completely different position, the radio deception unit begins their own performance. Corporal Bob Tompkins sits at a radio transmitter, Morse code key under his fingers. He is about to impersonate Staff Sergeant William Morrison of the 30th Infantry Division, 2nd Battalion Headquarters. Tompkins has never met Morrison, but he has studied Morrison's radio technique for weeks. Every operator keys Morse code slightly differently. Some tap fast and sharp. Others use longer, flowing rhythms. German signals intelligence catalogs these patterns. They maintain files on individual American radio operators. If Tompkins sounds wrong, they will know this is not really Morrison. Tompkins begins transmitting. Standard traffic, supply requisitions, weather reports, mundane details that real units send constantly. Nothing dramatic, nothing suspicious, just the radio signature of a battalion settling into position. But here is what makes this so dangerous. The Ghost Army is not just imitating one radio operator. They are imitating entire division networks. Multiple battalions, dozens of operators, all transmitting simultaneously on different frequencies, all using correct call signs, encryption procedures, and individual keying styles. One mistake anywhere in this web of fake transmissions could expose the whole operation. And the Germans are listening. Always listening. In fact, Allied intelligence intercepts prove that Wehrmacht signals units are incredibly sophisticated. They do not just record messages. They use direction-finding equipment to pinpoint transmission locations. They track which units are communicating with each other. They notice when familiar operators go silent or new voices appear. The Ghost Army must account for all of this. So the radio unit does something brilliant. They study actual division movements from previous operations. When a real division relocates, certain radio patterns emerge. Long-range communication decreases during transit. Short-range tactical frequencies increase once units arrive. Specific types of messages spike at predictable times. The Ghost Army replicates these patterns exactly. They create a radio fingerprint identical to a real division deployment. But even this is not enough, because German intelligence does not just analyze radio traffic in isolation. They cross-reference everything: radio signals, aerial photographs, sound detection, spy reports. If any piece contradicts the others, the deception fails. This is where the Special Effects Unit enters the picture. Sergeant Harold Dahl oversees what might be the weirdest job in the entire Army. His team creates fake evidence of military activity. They drive trucks repeatedly over the same dirt roads to create tire tracks that aerial photos will capture. They hang laundry on lines near fake camps because real soldiers wash clothes. They even light campfires and cooking stoves at mealtimes, so German observation posts see smoke rising at expected hours. During one operation, Dahl's team scattered thousands of cigarette butts around a dummy headquarters. Real soldiers smoke constantly. A clean camp looks suspicious. They also left half-eaten rations, muddy boots outside tent flaps, and playing cards on makeshift tables. Every tiny detail reinforces the illusion. But Dahl knows something that keeps him awake at night. All of this elaborate staging only works if German scouts do not get close enough to touch anything. The inflatable tanks look perfect from 500 feet. From 50 feet, you can see wrinkles in the rubber. The dummy artillery is convincing in photographs. Walk up and lean against it, the whole thing collapses. The Ghost Army is performing theater, but the stage has no walls. The audience can walk on to the set at any moment. And if they do, the actors cannot break character because breaking character means dying. Which brings us to perhaps the most dangerous job in the entire unit: the Special Security Detachment. These are the soldiers who maintain the perimeter around deception sites. Not with weapons, though they carry those. With acting. If a French civilian stumbles near the fake camp, security personnel intercept them. They play the role of regular infantry, complain about officers, grumble about rations, casually mention their division number, make it seem completely normal. The civilian leaves thinking they met bored American soldiers, never suspecting those soldiers were protecting a massive lie. But what if a German patrol penetrates the perimeter? What if enemy scouts reach the inflatable tanks before security can stop them? That happened exactly once. Belgium, December 1944. A German reconnaissance team bypassed the security line during a snowstorm. They walked directly into a field of dummy vehicles. The Ghost Army soldiers had maybe 30 seconds before the Germans realized everything was fake. They opened fire. Not to kill, though some Germans died. To create chaos. To make it seem like the Germans had stumbled into a real military position that was defending itself. The firefight lasted 4 minutes. When it ended, 3 Ghost Army soldiers were wounded and 2 Germans were dead. The rest of the German patrol retreated. Did they report what they saw? Did they tell their intelligence officers about the strange vehicles that seemed wrong? No one knows. But German forces did attack that position with artillery the next day, suggesting they still believed it was real. The Ghost Army counted that as a success, though the wounded soldiers might have disagreed. Now, in March 1945, all of these elements come together for Operation Viersen. Inflatable tanks positioned with deliberately imperfect spacing. Sonic trucks preparing to broadcast hours of armored division sounds. Radio operators ready to transmit as multiple battalion networks. Special effects teams adding thousands of realistic details. Security personnel memorizing their cover stories. 1,200 men creating the signature of 30,000. But they are not doing this in some safe training area. They are doing this within artillery range of German guns, within walking distance of enemy patrols, in a forest where one punctured tank, one wrong radio transmission, one suspicious detail in a photograph could collapse the entire illusion and condemn thousands of real soldiers to death. Arthur Shilstone finishes painting mud streaks on his rubber tank. He steps back and examines his work. It looks perfect, exactly like a Sherman that traveled through French mud for 3 days before parking here. He wonders if he will live long enough to paint magazine covers again, or if a German shell is going to destroy him and his paintbrush and his fake tank in the next few hours. The deception is ready. Now they wait to see if the masters of illusion can fool the masters of war. The order comes at 04:00 hours. Move now. Private Ed Bio has 15 minutes to make an entire armored company appear out of nowhere. In the darkness, he and 3 other soldiers grab an inflatable Sherman tank, drag it 50 yards through mud, stake it down, and start pumping air. The compressor sounds impossibly loud. Every hiss of air feels like screaming their position to German lines 800 meters away. 800 meters. That is the length of 8 football fields. A German MG-42 machine gun is accurate to 1,000 meters. BioW works faster. This is Operation Viersen. March 18, 1945. The mission that will either validate everything the Ghost Army has trained for or get thousands of real soldiers killed. Right now, 15 miles north, the actual 9th Army is preparing to cross the Rhine River at Rheinberg. 30,000 men. Hundreds of vehicles. Artillery battalions. The largest American river assault since D-Day. If it succeeds, Allied forces punch through the last natural barrier protecting Germany. If it fails, the casualties will be catastrophic. Everything depends on what happens in this forest in the next 72 hours. The Ghost Army has to convince German intelligence that those 30,000 soldiers are here, not at Rheinberg. They have to make Wehrmacht commanders believe the main assault is coming at Viersen. They have to trick some of the most experienced military analysts in the world into positioning their best divisions in the wrong place, with inflatable tanks and speakers playing sound effects. Colonel Frederick E. Day, commanding officer of the 406th Combat Engineers, watches the deception take shape. Day is not part of the Ghost Army. He commands real engineer battalions that will support the actual Rhine crossing. But right now, his men are helping the Ghost Army set up fake bridging equipment at Viersen. Dummy pontoons, inflatable boats, props that suggest engineers are preparing a major river assault at this location. Day knows exactly what is at stake. If German artillery targets this position, his real engineers will take casualties protecting a lie. If German armor counterattacks here, his men will have to hold the line with minimal support because the real combat units are 15 miles away. Day volunteered his unit for this mission anyway, because if the deception works, hundreds of his fellow soldiers at Rheinberg will survive a crossing that should kill them. That is the math everyone keeps running in their heads. Risk some lives here to save many lives there. The sonic trucks move into their positions. Lieutenant Bill Hartman checks the playback schedule. At Euro 600 hours, they will begin broadcasting sounds of bridging operations. Hammering, welding, boats being loaded, construction noise that will be audible across the Rhine River to German observers. At 0800, tank sounds join the mix. By noon, the audio signature must convince enemy intelligence that an entire assault force is assembling. But Hartman has a problem. Intelligence reports indicate German sound detection units are operating in this sector. Not just listening, actively analyzing. These units use directional microphones and triangulation to pinpoint exactly where sounds originate. If they locate the sonic trucks, German artillery will destroy them within minutes. So the sonic unit does something insane. They keep moving. Play a recording for 20 minutes, shut down, relocate half a mile, set up again. It is exhausting. It is dangerous. And it is the only way to avoid becoming a target. The downside is that constant movement creates gaps in the audio deception, periods of silence when there should be continuous activity. Hartman gambles that German observers will interpret the silence as normal operational pauses. Lunch breaks, equipment maintenance, shift changes. Real military operations are not continuous noise. They have rhythms. Hartman is betting he understands those rhythms better than the enemy listening from across the river. Meanwhile, the radio deception reaches a level of complexity that seems impossible to sustain. The Ghost Army is now transmitting as the 30th Infantry Division and the 79th Infantry Division simultaneously. 2 complete division radio networks. Hundreds of fake transmissions per day. Supply requests, reconnaissance reports, artillery coordinates, medical evacuations, weather updates. Every type of message real divisions send constantly. But here is what makes this particular operation terrifying. The 30th and 79th Divisions actually exist. They are real units fighting in other sectors. German intelligence has files on these divisions. They know their radio procedures. They recognize their operators. If the Ghost Army makes one mistake, sends one message that contradicts what the real divisions are doing, Wehrmacht analysts will immediately know something is wrong. So Ghost Army radio operators are doing something unprecedented. They are impersonating specific divisions while those divisions are actively operating elsewhere. They have to create a parallel radio reality. A fictional version of the 30th and 79th that sounds completely authentic, but never contradicts the actual unit's real transmissions. It is like writing a novel in real time while someone else is writing a different novel with the same characters. And both stories have to make perfect sense independently. Corporal John Jarvie is coordinating this impossible task. He has maps showing where the real 30th Division is located. He monitors their actual radio traffic to avoid conflicts. Then he creates fictional traffic for the Ghost Army version of the 30th that sounds consistent with the division preparing for a river assault at Viersen. Different mission. Different location. Same authentic radio signature. If Jarvie's brain melts from the mental gymnastics, no one would blame him. But the radio deception has another layer. German direction-finding equipment can pinpoint transmission sources. If all the Ghost Army transmissions originate from the same small area, enemy analysts will know something is off. Real divisions spread across miles of terrain. Their radio signals come from dispersed locations. So, Ghost Army radio operators are scattered across a 5-mile radius. Some transmitting from farmhouses, others from vehicles hidden in tree lines, a few actually inside German artillery range, deliberately exposing themselves to danger so the transmission geometry looks correct. They are risking death to make math work. At 0730 hours, a German reconnaissance plane flies over the Viersen sector. Every Ghost Army soldier who sees it feels their stomach drop. This is the moment, the test. Photographers in that plane are capturing images that Wehrmacht intelligence will analyze within hours. If the deception looks wrong, if anything seems suspicious, German commanders will know this is a diversion. They will reinforce Rheinberg. The real assault will face maximum resistance. The plane makes 3 passes, low enough that soldiers on the ground can see the camera ports. Then it turns and disappears east. Now comes the worst part. Waiting. The Ghost Army has no way to know if the deception worked until German forces respond. Or do not respond. They can only maintain the illusion and hope. At 1100 hours, the first indication arrives. German artillery opens fire on the Viersen position. Shells scream overhead and explode among the fake tanks. Shrapnel tears through rubber vehicles, collapsing them instantly. Soldiers dive for cover. The barrage lasts 8 minutes. When it stops, a third of the inflatable equipment is destroyed. But here is the critical question. Is this German artillery targeting what they think is a real armored division, or have they figured out it is fake and are mocking the deception? Intelligence officer Lieutenant Bob Coyen analyzes the barrage pattern. The shells targeted vehicle concentrations. The firing solutions were calculated for destroying actual armor. The Germans used expensive anti-tank rounds, not cheap high explosive. Everything suggests they believe they are hitting a real threat. The deception is working. Coyen reports to command. Then he orders the Ghost Army to do something that sounds suicidal. Replace the destroyed inflatable tanks immediately. If aerial reconnaissance shows that vehicle positions are suddenly empty after an artillery strike, German analysts will know something is wrong. Real tank crews repair damage. Move damaged vehicles. Bring in replacements. The fake division has to behave like a real division absorbing casualties. So soldiers run into the impact zone while German spotters are potentially still watching. They drag destroyed inflatables away, inflate new tanks in the exact same positions, add fresh camouflage. Within 90 minutes, the fake armored company looks fully operational again. From a German observation post across the Rhine, it appears American forces took casualties, but are continuing preparations. Exactly what a determined assault force would do. At 16 watt-hours, Allied intelligence intercepts German radio traffic. Wehrmacht commands are repositioning units toward Viersen. Elements of the 116th Panzer Division are moving south. Infantry reinforcements are digging in along the eastern riverbank opposite the Ghost Army position. It is working. The Germans are taking the bait. But this creates a new nightmare. The more convincing the deception becomes, the more German forces will concentrate here, which means more artillery, more potential for patrols crossing the river to investigate, more chances that someone will get close enough to realize the American division is made of rubber and speakers. At 22 hours, patrols report German activity on the river. Small boats, possibly scouts attempting to cross and gather intelligence on American positions. If enemy troops reach the Ghost Army lines and capture anyone, the interrogation will expose everything. Security units go on high alert. They are authorized to engage any German forces that get too close, not just to protect themselves, to protect the entire 9th Army operation at Rheinberg. Private Bayau, who inflated tanks at 0400, is now manning a defensive position with a rifle. The irony is not lost on him. He joined the Ghost Army to avoid front-line combat. Now he is potentially going to fight German scouts to protect inflatable tanks. This is not what he signed up for. But it is what the mission demands. At AWO 200 hours on March 19th, the real assault begins at Rheinberg, 15 miles north. The 9th Army crosses the Rhine under cover of darkness. Intelligence reports indicate German resistance is lighter than expected. Wehrmacht forces are deployed south at Viersen, exactly where the Ghost Army wanted them. The deception worked. But the Ghost Army cannot stop. Not yet. They must maintain the illusion for at least another 48 hours. If they pack up and leave immediately after the Rheinberg crossing begins, German commanders will realize they were fooled. They will redirect forces north. The 9th Army needs time to establish a bridgehead strong enough to withstand counterattacks. So, the Ghost Army stays, broadcasting sounds, transmitting radio traffic, replacing damaged inflatable equipment after each artillery strike, pretending to be an assault force that will never actually attack. More German shells fall. More inflatable tanks are destroyed and replaced. Soldiers are wounded. One man from the sonic unit takes shrapnel in the leg when a barrage catches his half-track before he can relocate. They are suffering real casualties to maintain a fake division. By March 21st, the 9th Army has established a strong bridgehead at Rheinberg. Allied armor is pouring across pontoon bridges. German resistance is collapsing. The Rhine has been breached. The road to Berlin is open. At Viersen, the Ghost Army receives orders to withdraw. They deflate the tanks, pack the sonic equipment, shut down the radio networks. Within 6 hours, the Phantom Division that convinced German intelligence to position thousands of troops in the wrong place simply vanishes. 1,200 men saved an unknowable number of lives. How many Ninth Army soldiers survived the Rhine crossing because German panzers were waiting at the wrong location? How many families received letters from sons and husbands instead of condolence telegrams because the Ghost Army played sound effects and inflated rubber tanks? No one will ever calculate the exact number. But everyone who served at Viersen knows one thing with absolute certainty. The greatest weapon in war is not always the one that fires bullets. Sometimes it is the one that fires imagination. The man who should have seen through everything is staring at a photograph. His name is Oberst Heinrich Reinhardt. He commands intelligence analysis for Wehrmacht forces defending the Rhine sector. Before the war, Reinhardt taught mathematics at Heidelberg University. He understands probability, pattern recognition, statistical analysis. His job is to look at evidence and find the truth hidden underneath. Right now, he is looking at aerial reconnaissance photos of American positions at Viersen. And everything he sees tells him a major assault is coming at this location. Except it is all a lie. And Reinhardt has no idea. This is the moment that defines Operation Viersen. Not the inflatable tanks or the sound effects or the radio deception. Those are just tools. The real weapon is psychology. Understanding how the human mind processes information. Exploiting the assumptions even brilliant analysts make. Turning an enemy's intelligence-gathering capability against itself. Because here is what the Ghost Army understands that most people do not. Deception does not work by showing people something fake. It works by showing people exactly what they expect to see. Reinhardt expects to see an American division preparing to cross the Rhine. So that is what the Ghost Army shows him. Not some elaborate fantasy. Just a completely normal military deployment. Tank companies in standard defensive formations, supply dumps positioned at regulation distances from frontline units, radio traffic following routine communication protocols. Nothing suspicious, nothing unusual, just another American division doing exactly what American divisions do. The deception hides in plain sight. But Reinhardt is not stupid. He cross-references everything. Aerial photos, radio intercepts, sound detection reports, agent intelligence from French informants. Every source must confirm the others. If anything contradicts, he will investigate. The Ghost Army knows this, so they orchestrated every element to tell the same story. The aerial photos show tank positions. The sound detection units report tank engine noises from those exact locations. Radio transmissions originate from coordinates that match the photographed positions. French civilians report seeing American armor moving through nearby villages, which is actually just Ghost Army trucks driving around at night with their headlights on to create the appearance of vehicle movement. Every piece of evidence supports every other piece. The intelligence mosaic is perfect, almost too perfect, which is why the Ghost Army deliberately introduced imperfections. Some inflatable tanks are positioned poorly, exposing flanks that real commanders would protect. Radio operators occasionally send messages with minor encryption errors, the kind tired signalmen make during long operations. The sonic playback includes mechanical sounds that suggest equipment breakdowns. These tiny flaws make the deception believable, because real military operations are never flawless. Reinhardt analyzes the pattern. American forces have been probing the Rhine defenses for weeks. They need to cross somewhere. Viersen is a logical choice. Wide enough for pontoon bridges. Roads on both sides suitable for armor. The intelligence indicates 2 divisions, possibly the 30th and 79th, are concentrated there. He writes his assessment. High probability of assault at Viersen within 72 hours. Recommend reinforcing defensive positions. Reposition mobile reserves to enable rapid counterattack. Wehrmacht command accepts his analysis. They trust Reinhardt. He has been correct before. During the Battle of the Bulge, his intelligence assessments predicted American reinforcement patterns with remarkable accuracy. He knows how the Americans think, how they operate. And that expertise is exactly why he falls for the Ghost Army deception. Because the Ghost Army studied men like Reinhardt. They understand what German intelligence analysts look for. The patterns Wehrmacht officers recognize. The signatures they trust. And the Ghost Army replicates those signatures perfectly. But deception is never foolproof. There are always risks. Always moments when the truth nearly breaks through. On March 19th, a German artillery observer named Feldwebel Otto Kruger is watching the American positions through binoculars. He sees tanks, supply trucks, soldiers moving between positions. Everything looks normal. But something bothers him. He cannot articulate what. Just a feeling that something is wrong. Kruger focuses on one tank. From his position 1,200 meters away, it looks real. But the way it sits seems odd. The angle is strange. He watches for 15 minutes. The tank does not move. Not even small adjustments that crews make constantly. Just absolutely still. He reports this to his commanding officer. The officer dismisses it. Tanks in defensive positions do not move constantly. Kruger is seeing problems that do not exist. But Kruger cannot shake the feeling. He watches for another hour. Still no movement. Then wind picks up. And Kruger sees something impossible. The tank shifts slightly, not rolling on treads. Shifting like something light being pushed by wind. He grabs his radio, calls for immediate artillery strike on that specific position. Insists something is wrong with that tank. The artillery battery complies. 3 shells impact directly on the suspicious tank. When the smoke clears, Kruger looks through his binoculars, expecting to see destroyed armor. Instead, he sees shredded rubber and canvas blowing in the wind. His stomach drops. He realizes what he is looking at. Realizes the implications. If that tank is fake, maybe others are fake, maybe the entire American division is fake. He radios headquarters immediately, demands they listen. The Americans are running a deception operation. But headquarters does not believe him. Because Kruger's report contradicts everything else. Aerial reconnaissance shows dozens of tanks. Sound detection confirms armored vehicle activity. Radio intercepts prove division-level communications. One destroyed dummy tank does not invalidate mountains of confirming evidence. The intelligence officer who takes Kruger's call writes a note. Single inflatable decoy tank identified at Viersen. Likely used to supplement real armor positions. Standard American deception practice. Does not indicate broader deception operation. Kruger's discovery is filed as a minor footnote. Wehrmacht Command continues positioning forces to defend against the Viersen assault. The Ghost Army never knows how close they came to exposure. Never knows that one observant German sergeant almost unraveled the entire operation. They just keep broadcasting sounds and transmitting radio traffic and replacing damaged inflatable equipment. Meanwhile, 15 miles north at Rheinberg, the real Ninth Army is crossing the Rhine against unexpectedly light resistance. German commanders keep waiting for the attack at Viersen that will never come. But here is what makes the Ghost Army deception truly brilliant. It is not just about fooling the enemy. It is about understanding how organizations process information. Wehrmacht intelligence is a hierarchical system. Junior officers report to senior officers. Field observations are filtered through analysis sections. Information moves up chains of command, where each level adds interpretation and context. This system usually works well. It prevents overreaction to isolated incidents. It creates institutional knowledge, but it also creates institutional blindness. Kruger saw the truth. But Kruger is a Feldwebel, a sergeant. His report is one data point among thousands. Senior intelligence officers like Reinhardt have access to comprehensive analysis. They see the big picture. And the big picture, carefully crafted by the Ghost Army, shows an American division at Viersen. One sergeant's suspicions cannot overcome institutional consensus, especially when that consensus is built on multiple confirming intelligence streams. The Ghost Army weaponized this bureaucratic reality. They understood that German intelligence would not believe a single contradictory report when everything else confirmed the deception. So they made sure everything else confirmed the deception. Aerial reconnaissance? Show them tanks in photos. Sound detection? Play them tank noises. Radio intercepts? Send them tank division transmissions. Agent reports. Make sure French civilians see American vehicles. Create a multi-layered illusion where every intelligence discipline confirms the others. And it worked. By March 21st, the Ninth Army has established a bridgehead at Rheinberg. Allied forces are pouring across the Rhine. German defenders are reacting, but too late. Their reserves are positioned at Viersen, defending against phantoms. When Wehrmacht command finally realizes the main assault happened at Rheinberg, they try to redirect forces. But moving panzer divisions takes time. Hours become days. By the time German armor reaches Rheinberg, American engineers have built permanent bridges. Allied anti-tank guns are dug in. The bridgehead is unbreakable. The Ghost Army deception did not just fool German intelligence. It paralyzed German response capability at the critical moment. Oberst Reinhardt eventually learns what happened. Months later, after the war, he reads reports about the 23rd Headquarters Special Troops, about their inflatable equipment and sonic deception, about how 1,200 men impersonated 30,000. He realizes he was the target, that every piece of intelligence he analyzed was manufactured specifically to deceive analysts like him, that his expertise, his careful methodology, his thorough cross-referencing, all of it was anticipated and exploited. Some historians claim Reinhardt felt humiliated, that being fooled by rubber tanks and sound effects embarrassed him professionally. But those historians misunderstand what happened. Reinhardt was not fooled by props. He was defeated by psychology, by an enemy who understood human cognition better than he did, who knew that even the most rigorous analysis is vulnerable if you control the information being analyzed. That is not embarrassing. That is terrifying. Because it means the perfect illusion is not the one that looks real. It is the one that confirms what the observer already believes. The Ghost Army did not convince German intelligence of something new. They simply reinforced existing German expectations about American operational patterns. The greatest magic trick ever pulled was making the audience think they figured it out themselves. Feldwebel Kruger, the sergeant who spotted the fake tank, survived the war. In 1947, he was interviewed by American historians documenting Ghost Army operations. They asked if he felt vindicated when the deception was revealed. Kruger said something that summarizes the entire operation perfectly. "I saw the truth. But truth means nothing if no one believes you. Your Ghost Army understood that. They did not just fool our eyes. They fooled our system. And against that, one man, seeing truth, is powerless." The Ghost Army proved that reality is not what exists. Reality is what people can be convinced to believe. And if you control that, you control everything. The secret stays buried for 51 years. May 1996. A retired art professor named Bill Blass receives a phone call from the National Archives. A researcher has found declassified documents about a unit called the 23rd Headquarters Special Troops. The researcher wants to know if Blass served with them, if he remembers what they did during the war. Blass laughs. Remembers? He has spent half a century not talking about it. Because when the Ghost Army was disbanded in 1945, every soldier signed secrecy agreements. They were forbidden from discussing their operations, forbidden from telling their families what they did during the war. The military classified everything. The inflatable tanks were destroyed or locked in warehouses. The sonic equipment was dismantled. The radio logs were sealed. The most successful deception unit in American military history was erased from official records. When Ghost Army veterans came home, people asked what they did in the war. They could not answer honestly. So they said they were engineers, supply clerks, support personnel, boring jobs far from combat. Their families believed they sat out the war in safe positions. The truth was they operated within rifle range of German lines. 3 men were killed, dozens wounded. But they could not talk about it, could not explain that they saved thousands of lives with rubber props and sound effects. The secrecy oath was absolute. For decades, the Ghost Army soldiers kept the secret. They went to reunions and spoke in code, made vague references that only other unit members understood, watched documentaries about the Rhine crossing and knew they were part of that story, but could not claim credit. Bill Blass became one of the most famous fashion designers in America. Ellsworth Kelly's paintings sold for millions. Art Kane photographed the most iconic images in music history. These men achieved remarkable post-war success, but none of them could talk about the most important thing they ever did. Until 1996, when the government finally declassified the Ghost Army files. Suddenly the story emerged. Journalists wrote articles, historians requested interviews. The veterans, now in their 70s, could finally talk. And what they described sounded impossible. Inflatable tanks fooling German intelligence, artists and sound engineers impersonating armored divisions, a traveling theater company operating on the front lines. Some people did not believe it, thought the veterans were exaggerating, embellishing boring support roles into dramatic deception missions. But then the photographs surfaced. Images of soldiers inflating dummy tanks, sonic trucks with massive speakers, radio operators at their equipment. The physical evidence proved every impossible claim was true. The Ghost Army conducted over 20 major deception operations between 1944 and 1945. Operation Viersen was just one. Each mission followed the same pattern. Study the target area. Determine what German intelligence expected to see. Create that exact illusion using inflatable equipment sound effects, and radio deception. Maintain the deception long enough for real operations to succeed elsewhere. The cumulative impact is almost impossible to calculate. How many American soldiers survived because German forces were positioned in wrong locations? How many battles were won because enemy commanders made decisions based on false intelligence? Conservative estimates suggest the Ghost Army operations saved between 10,000 and 30,000 Allied lives. Some historians argue the number is much higher, that the psychological impact of successful deceptions caused German command to doubt all intelligence, creating hesitation that affected multiple operations. But the Ghost Army soldiers themselves never talk about their work in those terms. They do not claim to be heroes. When interviewed, they describe themselves as guys who did a weird job that happened to work out. Harold Dahl, the special effects sergeant who scattered cigarette butts around fake camps, was asked in 2001 if he was proud of his service. He said something remarkable. Proud? I do not know. We lied professionally. We were good at lying. That is a strange thing to take pride in. But if those lies saved real soldiers from dying, then yes. I suppose I am proud we lied effectively. That moral complexity defines the Ghost Army legacy. They succeeded through deception, through manipulation, through creating false realities that caused enemy commanders to make fatal mistakes. In any other context, those skills would be considered unethical. But in war, they became a weapon that saved lives. The veterans struggled with that paradox. Artists who spent their careers creating beautiful things had spent the war creating beautiful lies. Was that heroic, shameful, pragmatic? They did not always know. Jack Macy, the soldier who inflated tanks while German patrols were nearby, became a successful exhibit designer after the war. He created museum installations and World's Fair pavilions, spaces designed to communicate truth through visual storytelling. When asked if his Ghost Army experience influenced his later work, he said this: "Absolutely. I learned that what people see and what exists are not always the same thing. I learned that context shapes perception, that details create believability. Those are fundamental design principles. I just learned them while trying not to get shot." But not all Ghost Army veterans processed their experience positively. Some struggled with what they had done. The men killed by German artillery targeting fake positions haunted them. They understood intellectually that those deaths were not their fault, that enemy soldiers die in war. But emotionally, they felt responsible. One veteran, who requested anonymity in interviews, described nightmares where he inflated a rubber tank and watched it come to life, only to be destroyed by German shells with real crews burning inside. The psychological weight of creating phantom armies that drew real fire never fully lifted. The Ghost Army was officially recognized in 2024, 79 years after their final operation. Congress awarded the unit the Congressional Gold Medal, one of the highest civilian honors in America. Only 3 Ghost Army veterans were still alive to receive it. The ceremony acknowledged their courage, creativity, and the lives they saved through deception. But recognition came too late for most. Bill Blass died in 2002, Ellsworth Kelly in 2015, Art Kane in 1995. Hundreds of Ghost Army soldiers passed away, never receiving public acknowledgement for what they accomplished. Their obituaries described successful post-war careers. Few mentioned they had been part of the most audacious military deception in history. The few surviving veterans who attended the 2024 medal ceremony were asked if they felt vindicated. if official recognition justified the decades of secrecy. One veteran, 98 years old, gave an answer that captured everything. Vindicated. We did not need vindication. We knew what we did. We knew it mattered. Recognition is nice, but it does not change history. We saved lives. That was always enough. The Ghost Army's legacy extends beyond World War II. Their techniques influenced modern military deception doctrine. The concept of multi-layered illusions, coordinating visual, audio, and electronic deception, became standard practice. Every modern military studies Ghost Army operations when developing information warfare strategies. But the equipment evolved. Inflatable tanks gave way to digital false targets. Sonic trucks were replaced by electronic warfare systems that spoof radar. Radio deception became cyber operations, creating false digital signatures. The technology changed completely. The psychology remained identical. Make the enemy see what they expect. Confirm their assumptions. Feed their intelligence-gathering systems information that leads to wrong conclusions. Control perception, and you control decision-making. The Ghost Army proved this works, not in theory, in actual combat against a sophisticated enemy. They took artists and sound engineers and radio operators, gave them rubber props and speakers, and convinced German intelligence that phantom divisions were real. And when the truth finally emerged 51 years later, it did not diminish the achievement. It amplified it. Because the world learned that 1,200 men with creativity and courage had saved thousands of lives without firing a shot. That is the final lesson of the Ghost Army. The most powerful weapon in war is not always the one that destroys. Sometimes it is the one that deceives. Sometimes victory comes not from killing the enemy, but from convincing the enemy to defeat themselves. The Ghost Battalion fooled Hitler's best divisions, not with superior firepower, not with brilliant tactics, with imagination, with understanding that reality is perception, and perception can be manufactured. They were artists who painted illusions on the canvas of war, and their masterpiece was saving lives by making the enemy look the wrong direction at the critical moment. The last surviving Ghost Army veteran, when asked what he wanted people to remember about the unit, said this: "Remember that we proved creativity is a weapon, that thinking differently can be more effective than fighting harder. That 1,200 ordinary soldiers did something extraordinary because someone gave them permission to think like artists instead of warriors. And that made all the difference. The Ghost Army operated in shadows for 51 years. Now their story is revealed, not as ancient history, but as proof that the human mind, properly applied, can change the course of nations. They were ghosts who haunted the German army, and their legacy still haunts military strategists who understand that the greatest battles are won before the first shot is fired. The Phantom Army was real. The impact was undeniable. The lesson is eternal. Deception, when executed perfectly, saves more lives than courage alone ever could.